Hello and welcome to the video. This is a quick video on these things here. These are flight controllers, specifically Matek flight controllers that I use in an awful lot of my wings and planes that I build here. Those of you that watch the channel a lot will have seen multiple builds over the past 7 or 8 years with INAV in lots of different configurations. And these are the two favourites that I have been putting in the majority of those models if you've been watching those videos. The first flight controller is this one. This is something called the Matek F411 WSE. This only had 4 PWM outputs and it was perfect for things like wings. Now, this has been my go-to for small compact builds for a long time. And they also managed to produce a version of the firmware in things like INAV where it remapped some of the pins, so the LED pin you lost became a Softserial pin, and that was a great way to connect things like the on-screen display from INAV. So even with this little board, there was just enough UARTs on here so you could plug your GPS and your serial receiver in, and then you could also plug in your on-screen display into your DJI HD system if you had that on your wing. I have a lot of them here, and it worked absolutely beautifully. However, this is no longer available really. I still have a few in my spares bin. This one has just been pulled out of my Dolphin, but we'll get to that in a moment. I'm still using them. But there are limitations with boards like this because of the lack of UARTs, because it's physically a smaller board here. There isn't a full hardware UART in order to run the on-screen display for some of the other HD systems that need a full speed hardware UART for it to work, specifically things like HD0 and also my walk snail system that I am becoming a huge fan of. I need a hardware UART. Now, historically, the way I'd have done that would have been not to use one of these F411 WSEs. I'd have used one of these things. This is a Matek F405 wing. Again, this is another one that is no longer available. It's kind of been replaced. The reason I've got US question mark written on it is it came out of a wing that crashed, and actually I need to take that off because I've just finished testing it. These are pretty bulletproof boards. They have an awful lot more connections on them. They're physically, obviously, a lot bigger, so they don't fit in all the same places that these things do. However, if you need extra UARTs for maybe things like airspeed sensors, things like additional connections for things like a walk snail or a HD0 on-screen display system, these work great. So for potentially if you wanted something like a pan and tilt system on your plane, so you need 2 spare PWM outputs, this was the one I would go for. However, both of these are kind of old school now. They're no longer available. They're still supported in INAV and will still be supported in lots of things, including things like ArduPilot for a long time. So I've got 2 of the new ones in here, and I want to explain why these are now becoming my 2 go-tos. The first one we'll talk about is this one here. This is the Matek Sys FC411 WTE. So this is kind of the successor to this little fellow here, the WSE. So let's open it up and take a look at the board and talk about what it has, but also what it still hasn't got. So if you were a fan of this other board type, the old WSE, this is going to feel very, very familiar. So once we have it out of its wrapping, this is what it looks like. So a couple of things spring out at me very, very quickly. First of all is they have changed the connector to the USB-C style, which I'm a big fan of, because some of the issues, lots of people have had issues with these kind of connectors with wiping configurations and dodgy connections, snapping them off and all kinds of stuff. These seem a lot sturdier. So if we go through the specs of this F411 WTE, it has 2 hardware UARTs, 2 Softserials, 2 motor connections and 4 PWM connections. So very similar connection specs to the older beloved WSE. So this will kind of do everything that this did. So it's going to be perfect for things like smaller wings, and you're going to see these boards cropping up when I'm building those very tight spaced models where there isn't an awful lot of room and I only need 4 PWM outputs. Now, because it only has 2 full hardware UARTs, I wish they'd squeeze one more on here. Sadly, it's not necessarily going to be the perfect option for those of us that want to put something like the HD0 or the walk snail system in their models, where you need a full speed hardware UART to do that. So to do that, then the other board that I've got in is the one that you're going to see an awful lot of. This is kind of going to be my spiritual successor to this board here. So this, if you remember, is the F405 wing that lots of us, I think, love. This thing is the F405 woman, WMN. Now, if I open this, this is physically the same size as the one we've just looked at. However, it has 5 hardware UARTs and a load more connections. So let me just get this out of the bag. So again, this is the F405 WMN. So it's not that different in size physically from its brother, which is the F411 WTE. They're kind of the same size, you can see. However, this little fella has an awful lot more on here, and that's because they've moved some stuff onto this separate daughter board that's connected via this cable. On here is a buzzer, which is a very, very handy thing if you're going to run something like INAV, tells you what's going on. And it also, again, has the USB-C style connection. There's even a little switch on here that you can turn the buzzer on and off. And this is very handy, so you can actually hide this away in the model where it's going to fit, but you can pop this somewhere where you can easily get your USB cable on it. Now this, believe it or not, has 5 full hardware UARTs. It has Softserial 2 and has a total of 12 PWM outputs. There's the standard 4 here, just like the original boards has, and then there's a load of additional ones that you can use on one of the expansion boards to get additional PWM outputs. So things like that pan and tilt setup that normally I'd have had to go for the much bigger flight controller, I will now be able to do with this little fella. So why are these two now my new 2 favorite boards? Well, both of these now allow me to fit a very, very small compact flight controller inside pretty much any model, even if they're not necessarily designed to have a flight controller inside with something like INAV. This one in particular, the WMN, is perfect with its extra UARTs for those more complicated builds. Things like where you want to add an airspeed sensor, things where you have a walk snail or a HD0 on-screen display that you want to run, or you might just want to run your DJI on-screen display using a regular hardware UART as well. All of that is available here, and you also get the buzzer too, so you don't have to install that separately. It's already taken care of. Now, when I was looking at which one I was going to install into that Atom RC Dolphin, see, I told you we were going to get back to that, I kind of sat down with the wiring diagrams because unfortunately Matek don't appear to be putting the INAV ports in the wiring diagrams like they used to. That was incredibly easy to follow. So as I'm quite a visual learner, I had to sit and do a diagram. So the diagram, I thought I'd get away with one of these originally. This is the F411 WTE. I kind of mapped everything of how it was all going to connect, and there's just not enough UARTs. Of the 2 UARTs that are on here, one is going to be used for the serial connection, the other one's going to be used for a GPS. So I can't use this. This is basically going to give me the same problem that I had with the original flight controller that was in there. So this is the fella that's going to go in. This F405 woman WMN. This is going to go in there, and I'm going to wire it up so that I have all the regular connections, and not only will I be able to wire everything up, I'm still going to have lots of spare UARTs if I want to add an airspeed sensor, and I've even got spare PWM connections for things like pan and tilt, or maybe even controlling LEDs, things like the Menace RC Cobb LEDs I'm thinking of adding to this model. I can do that all with this as well. So if you are going to be watching the channel in the near future, you're going to see these more, rather than the old school original boards that I loved, that I trusted, the F411 WSE and the F405 wing. Although they'll still crop up time to time, I still have spares in the spares bin. These are 2 of them. For new builds where I want to use the latest and greatest technology, these are the 2 that I'm going to be using. I'll put links down below, and hopefully the remaiden of the Dolphin is going to go perfectly, and I'm going to be able to fly it now with a full Walksnail OSD. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organized into easy to follow playlists that, if you're trying to learn a topic, will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.